The Chicago Tribune was saying, come home.
Oh, you were in a bidding war. Oh, you were going to be the big-time come-home columnist. They would have paid you tons of money.
Took the space after I was offered the space.
They offered you the job. You turned it down.
My hometown paper, the paper I delivered as a kid growing up.
That would have been the dream.
The face was already on the side of buses. They had the ad drawn up. I saw it.
Hold on. Tell me about this. So I didn't know this. So you had a bidding war for your services between the Washington Post and your hometown newspaper, the newspaper you dreamed about being the column voice for when you were delivering
Bob
papers.
Verdi, David Israel.
What age were you delivering
Mike
papers?
From 11 to college.
Okay, so what happened there? Like what? Because your path would have been different. You wouldn't have done the Tony.
Well, I could have. Jay Mariotti thought of this before anybody. Jay Mariotti, the Chicago Sun-Times columnist, would have been my rival. Though we were, as you know, we're all colleagues.
But Skip Bayless is your fault. You're the original. You're ground zero for the virus.
I mean, Skip was doing his deal in Dallas. He wasn't doing it in Chicago. But Mariotti called me weekly. And he said, you got to come home. You got to take this. He knew about it. And because he said, WGN's going to put us on TV. This is a direct quote, and it's not from me. I wasn't smart enough. It's from Jay Mariotti. He said, the next Siskel and Ebert are not going to be at the movies. They're going to be in the press box. How prescient was that?
Not only prescient, Jay Mariotti could have been Tony instead of Tony, and would have been far worse than Bayless, and you and him would have killed each other.
You and
Jay Mariotti would have murdered each other on television.
We actually liked each other a lot.
That would have stopped. Wait a minute. You know how important these television relationships, how fraught they are?
Yes.
The fact that you and Tony Kornheiser
I know, it's a miracle.
Love one another.
We do.
The fact that he's among your best friends.
Yes, he is.
That would not have happened with Jay Mariotti.
No, it would have been a different relationship. I don't know what it would have been. But he was convinced that WGN would have done that. And I grew up reading Siskel and Ebert. Again, talk about transition, right? You know, the pioneer. Gene Siskel was a columnist at the Tribune before he was on TV. Roger Ebert was a columnist at the Sun-Times. I grew up reading them.
All right, you're not a pioneer. You're a copycat. You're a bogus fraud who steals from others. And you're Elvis.
Borrow from the best.
You're Elvis.
Borrow from the best. But so I was going to go to, every day I agonized over it. I will tell this story. I don't know if I told it publicly. I get a call these are pre-cell phones. I get a call at a landline at home from the GOAT, the real GOAT in the NBA. And he says, why do I have to hear at a cocktail party you're thinking about leaving and coming home to Chicago? Right for the Tribune. Suppose you found out at a cocktail party I hadn't told you. I'm like, you never would have told me anyway.
I can't believe LeBron made that phone call.
LeBron was in grade school then.
LeBron knew. No, he knew before.
Like 5. And I said to him, I told him, I said, okay, here's the dilemma. And we actually talked about it. And I learned how much I didn't know about money talking to him.
Well, what was the dilemma?
Jordan.
What was the dilemma?
The Tribune's offer or the Washington Post, Don Graham's offer. And I literally went through it with Michael on the phone. And he had serious, hard advice, like financial philosophy. Here's what you need to be looking for. And I learned then, of course, because at that point, he's almost at the last dance year. This is the year before the last dance. So he's at the end of his basketball career, playing career. And you realize that guys like him and Charles and I are working on books and stuff, that they know so much more, even though those guys are 4 years younger than me. They know so much more about money and finance, business, than we'd ever know as sports writers. Now, we know a lot more now than we ever thought we'd know. But at the time, Dan, I didn't have an agent. I didn't know anything.
So you stay at the Washington Post, and at that time, you and Tony are just you're arguing in the newsroom about.
We're on TV too a lot.
You're on local television.
Yeah, NBC affiliate.
And the chemistry was immediate between you two because he was older.
We didn't examine it. It was in the newspaper. Tony would write columns every Monday morning during a particular Redskins season, and he would use me as the foil in his column. And that's how it started. And Tony would take the apparent differences between us and just, you know how he is, he would just blow them up. The apparent differences are white and black, you know, New York Jew, South Side, Chicagoan, so Midwest, East Coast, Catholic Jew. And I'm not Catholic, but I went to Catholic school. I'm a product of that educational system. And Tony would take these things and he would juxtapose them.
He turned you into a character in print before you. He
turned me into a character in print and himself into one. And he did this, and we had this in Washington when when nobody else really knew unless you read the Post. And Tony did it brilliantly and generously and hysterically funny, as you know.
But are you proud of the sports television show, an enduring sports television show? Where does your pride reside? Yeah. The highest pride on what you've accomplished there? Is it lasting 20 years? Is it that you've been able to use a platform in a way that reaches and moves people? Like, what are the greatest prides?
You just stated it. It's yes, 20 years that you got to, God, it's going to be 22 years in October. Yeah, I mean, that's ridiculous.